Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. Today, we are talking about utilizing camera to cloud workflow in production, camera to cloud. Wow. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought we would be here. I would be saying that live on air. Huge thank you, of course, to Sigma and Atomos for hosting today's event. And for that, we have Frank Ramirez from Sigma and the wonderful, I've known him 10 whole minutes, but I love him. I got to meet him in person. Graham Elders, what's going on? Or Graham Sheldon. Why am I saying your middle name out here? Graham Sheldon. Graham, what's going on? Frank, good to see you again.
Hi, Derek.
It's been forever. Thanks for having us on.
Now, this is great.
Thank you.
This is exciting technology. I'm going to kind of set the stage for everybody out there who's watching. This is new technology. And as I was telling the guys before we went live, you guys might not even know what you don't know, but think of ways that you can incorporate this into your workflow as you're watching these guys talk shop for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. And really, this is something that, as Graham said before we went live, it's the direction we're going. So if you're not up on it, get up on it. If you're not liking it, get used to it. I think it's going to be around, but I'm going to turn it over to the two experts here, and I'm going to take my rightful seat off camera, but I'll see you guys in a little bit for some Q&A.
See you in a bit. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, thank you.
So Frank, maybe a good place to start is just what is camera to cloud? I mean, it is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You have a camera. In our case, the absolutely gorgeous Sigma FP right here with the 65 T1.5. That's the newest focal length in the Cine line. And, I built it out in sort of this director's viewfinder sort of situation, but camera to cloud is going from, for our purposes, from the Sigma FP or the FPL using the Atomos Ninja 5 with the Connect module on the back, or the Shogun with the module sometimes built in, depending on which pack you're getting, into the cloud. From there, you pick your destination. It could be Frame.io, it could be YouTube, it could be going live on Facebook. And you have other options to go live as well. And then, Frank, we can talk about a few use cases that might be useful for this technology for workflows out there. But for my part, documentary, scripted, commercial, event coverage, I think there's applications in all of those spaces, including broadcast media. I'm not a news gathering guy per se. I have nothing against it. I've just never done that. So there's probably some applications out there that I haven't thought of. So Frank, for your part, what is the promise of camera to cloud from your POV?
Well, there's so many opportunities out there. And like we said, it's a brand new technology. It's still developing. So we're still kind of laying out the foundations of what camera to cloud or C2C really is. For me, I was trying to get my head around it and still kind of like learn all the ins and outs. And I think for me, it was a little easier to kind of get up to speed with it because I come from a live broadcasting background, and that helped me get a little bit of like a little bit of stuff in context. Like we would record everything live for whatever event we were doing, send that out to whatever platform we were going to, and that process kind of is somewhat similar in a way, except aside from the fact that now we're gathering it in clips for us to send to Frame.io through the Atomos Cloud Studio. So some of our teammates around the world, you don't have to be on location. They can work on it and collaborate from across the world. I think it's an amazing opportunity. It increases a lot of the efficiencies and deficiencies that we have on set sometimes. So it makes everything work so much faster. There's so much to do. I mean, in the past 2 months that we've been really getting into this together, I've learned so much, and I can see so much in the future. So I'm really excited about it.
Me too. Yeah, I am extremely pumped. I would like to say I get pumped about all technology, but that's not the case. It's camera to cloud for me right now. And you touched on something that was so important, Frank, and it's the collaboration part of it. Mm-hmm. Because, we come out of this sort of 1950s era thinking that it's like, you know what, we're in a city, we're in a town, there's the best person for the job is within driving distance to our office. And that's honestly never been the case, at least for me in my workflow. I mean, I work with composers in London, graphics people in San Francisco, just all over the place. Tons of people in London actually lately. And you're able to get the best person for the job from wherever they are. And, we also have this kind of common chiseled into stone structure, if you will, of pre-production into production into post-production. And one of the things I love about camera to cloud as an idea is you can shift the post-production closer to production, which makes the editors and the post team in general feel like they're more involved with the pillar that is production. So for me, it's just enhancing all of the collaboration that I'm able to do in my work. And, the work that I do crosses kind of a couple different genres. I work in the documentary space, the scripted space, and the commercial space. And, maybe we can break those down into specific use cases for camera to cloud in each. But yeah, for your work, Frank, what are you most excited about? What particular use cases?
Oh, I mean, like, again, we're kind of spread out here in Sigma in the States. We have our office here in Burbank, but we have our marketing office and our head office in New York. So this is really important for us because we're separated by a couple thousand miles. So we can't always be in person with each other. So having something where I can go out and shoot some content that for a product or just in-house stuff and have that sent over to them remotely so that they can work on it immediately is just going to revolutionize and, like, again, speed us up and make things so much easier, and we can get content out to the people that use our stuff and are big fans of ours that we appreciate.
Yeah, and I think before we kind of dive into the workflow about how actually we make this work, which I'll be upfront, I don't think it's as complicated as maybe some viewers out there think it is. I mean, you're still working with HDMI cables. There's a couple of antennas. I mean, you can do this. But first I want to do just a quick off the bat shout out to the Atomos team that made this wonderful little, absolutely, streamlined package here that is the Ninja 5 with the Atomos Connect module kind of clicks into place here in the battery compartment at the back of the Ninja 5. And this, married with the Sigma FP, is what, at least for my part, makes this workflow really hum along. And I mean, these are not heavy devices. Of course, I've created the largest possible cinema rig I could here just to be, flashy and fun because I'm a cine guy. But you could make something very streamlined here, and you can be off to the races in your camera cloud workflow.
Totally. I think huge shout outs to Atomos because they've made everything so easy to use. It really is only a couple steps within the Atomos Ninja 5 recorder and the Connect module that just make this so simple. Anybody can really do it. And then with RFP, again, you have the biggest rig ever, but it's such a small little camera that you can go out and, like, have all this power, all this opportunity in the palm of your hands, and, like, really, really, really fun.
And I would just say too, continuing the Atomos love bandwagon here, is they seem as a company like they're really going into cloud-based solutions. And I mean, that's just been exciting to see because, as we've said time and time again, that feels very much like the future. So Frank, why don't we start from our beloved FP and go all the way through to the end from a hardware and a software perspective, and maybe I'll let you get started with that. What are the exact steps that people at home can follow to get their camera to cloud workflow going?
Yeah, okay, so essentially the first step is having the FP or the FPL. Now, in about maybe 2 months ago, we released the firmware update, the 3.0 for the FPL and the 5.0 for the FP, that allows this all to work with camera to cloud and really access its functionality. But really, all it is getting into the FP, making sure that you're in a space so you have everything powered up correctly, to then just hook up an HDMI port, like the micro HDMI to HDMI on the Atomos, and really get going pretty easily. All you have to do is turn it on and you're pretty much set to go. I know it took us like 5 minutes to really get it hooked up. It was actually pretty good.
Yeah, like most brand new things for me, I approached it with gritted teeth, being like, okay, here we go, user number 5 of a thing, and I did not get those, I would say, characteristic early adopter headaches with this one. I mean, you touched on something power wise, that's always a great place to, just start considering your
True.
rig. And actually, I have a photo of my personal camera to cloud rig, which I can pull up a little bit later in this conversation.
Mm.
But power is a great place to start. So for me, I'm using a dummy battery situation into the FP, and I'm also using a dummy battery onto the back of the Ninja 5 Atomos Connect. And then, yep, as you say, HDMI cable into the monitor. And from there, you're looking for a way to get to Atomos Cloud Studio, which is as simple as, I think this is kind of an entertaining way for Atomos Cloud Studio to find your monitor, so to speak. You type in like fedora, squirrel, dolphin,
Yeah.
just a random sequence of 3 words, and suddenly
No.
you are able to then see the Atomos device in Atomos Cloud Studio.
Mhm.
And that connection is actually very, very quick. And then, Frank, maybe you can touch on, you have a couple tiers that you sort of need to give some thought to from a pricing perspective. And then there's also a variety of tiers with Frame.io. So let's just be upfront with people about what sort of costs can they expect doing a workflow like this.
Right. I mean, they really do a good job of covering pretty much everybody on the spectrum. Whether you're an aspiring filmmaker, you're just kind of starting out, getting your rig together, so you have a free plan, and then you can kind of choose monthly the different price options, going up to like premium and pro, and seeing what they offer there. Stuff like progressive uploading and stuff like that. That's available, I think, across all tiers, if I'm not mistaken, Graham. It really does a good job of, again, making everything so much faster. While you're recording, for example, you can have a really long clip, and as you're recording, that's already kind of being uploaded to the cloud. Once you stop recording, it just leaves a little bit for that 10% to make it all the way through. But like for that whole entire time you've been recording, you've already have something in the works, which is really cool. So I like that that's across all levels and tiers.
Me too. Progressive upload is such a great piece of technology, and it's very useful, especially in interview situations, I find,
Right.
so that you don't have, after your hour interview, another hour to then wait for the file to upload. One of the things I also appreciate at this point in the workflow is actually the sort of real-time feedback that Atomos is giving you, because nothing is worse than hitting record and not knowing where your file's going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, I like that you can see on the monitor like what file, like what folder in wherever you're going, like Frame.io, you can see where that destination is going to be. It's going to be where your clip is going to be sent to. I think that's really useful.
Yeah, and right in the upper left of the Ninja 5 or the Shogun, you see like 1 file uploading, 2 file uploading, 3 files. And then you get that, Atomos has had this for a long time, but you get that characteristic like red border around your monitor, meaning I'm recording a thing. And when you set your monitor and your FP up for HDMI triggered recording, that's really one of the few settings you need to change inside your FP camera. And then with the Atomos, to get these 2 devices working in absolute sync. So Frank just mentioned a few of the Atomos cloud tiers. They're sort of, based around number of devices. If you're working in sort of a multi-cam environment, you can start adding cameras that are working with this. And then from Atomos Cloud Studio, the next destination is really up to you. And it's as easy as clicking in Atomos Cloud Studio. I want my stuff to go here. I want to either live stream or I want to go to Frame.io. And so Frame.io, like with Atomos Cloud Studio, has a free version and then has several other paid tiers. And those paid tiers are based primarily around, amount of data that you're sending into Frame.io. And we should talk about file sizes here for a moment. So currently, you're getting 720 with the free upload on sort of the base free plan with Atomos, going into HD, and I believe it is up to 30 megs per second. So Frank, these are in a sense proxy files. Can you talk a little bit about what is a proxy file? Why is that useful?
Okay, so proxies in simplest form are just smaller versions of the full files that you'll be recording on location. The benefits of having a proxy versus like the full res file is that they're so much easier to work with when you're sending stuff remotely, or whether you're in like your editing editor of choice. It's just so much easier to kind of put that in there, kind of get a framework of what your final edit's going to be or what your rough cut's going to be, and then go ahead later on and then relink those proxy files to your actual like full on raw footage, or like your high end high def footage. It makes things so much easier to work through, because not everybody's working on these studio rigs with a bunch of servers that can process all this information. Some people have regular laptops, and it's okay to be working on that. And it should be as seamless to work on that as if you're a content creator, as if you're like on a big studio set and you're in production for like the next feature film of the summer.
Exactly. Yeah. And proxy files, nimble little files, as Frank is saying, very, very easy to work with. And it also, reduces, I guess, the level of sweat on my forehead, because you're also saving your local files as well as sending the proxies. That's key. So you're getting, your favorite flavor of ProRes recorded into the Ninja 5 out of the FP at the same time. So you're still taking, in the case of the Ninja 5, that little, slim SSD. You're still handing that to a DIT or bringing it to an editor yourself. So that part of the workflow remains, but the relinking process, if you've ever done it, is very simple, and it just means everything gets going. And honestly, most people are making proxies anyway in sort of a 4K, 6K, environment anyway. So proxy workflow was sort of always there and has been there for a few years. So the relinking process shouldn't be, absolutely new for some of you. And if it is, that's okay. It's easy to understand. And one of the key things too is that Atomos is taking the metadata out of the FP. So all the file names are one-to-one. And if you've ever made that mistake before, that does make relinking incredibly hard. So thankfully you do have your core metadata.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially if you're a one-man band, sometimes forget that file structure is super important. It makes your life so much more difficult if you aren't consistent with your file naming. And the fact that Atomos and Frame.io and all that stuff kind of do it for you right out of the gate just makes your life so much easier. Like you really don't want to be searching for like that 1-2 second clip in like a whole library of like just random files and folders and stuff like that. It's just it really hurts your soul,
It does hurt your soul. It's one of those pain points where you're just like, it just you never forget that first lesson. It's a little like not locking a leg of an early tripod. It's that kind of lesson.
No, oh my god! I remember.
I'm sorry. Was that triggering?
That was triggering. I mean, I think we've all done it, so I think everyone kind of like just group cringed. But I think that's what happens to everybody when they're first starting out. Either you don't lock the leg of the tripod and it like leans over and you see your life flash in like slow motion, or you don't lock the head and you just see it kind of tilt forward. We've all been there. Hopefully it's not with like an expensive piece of kit, but like I think that hurt me a little bit.
Yeah, you don't forget that lesson once you've learned it. Frank, I think we should talk about the internet connection aspect of this, because this is the thing that I think is the other part of it that makes people the most nervous. And I should say that off the bat, results will vary on a per region basis, on a per town, on a per country basis, all over the planet. Internet infrastructure, even in where I am in North America, is spotty and isn't 100% everywhere. But there are some ways to make it more consistent. So Frank, you can use a Wi-Fi router. What are some of the other ways you could connect to the internet conceivably for camera to cloud?
Yeah, so we'll kind of like go up in like the tiers of that kind of
that's a good
idea. I think and professional maybe. If you're just a run and gun shooter like a lot of us are, and you're shooting in like your home studio or something, or like out in a studio location, you can connect to a really stable Wi-Fi if there is one available through a hotspot or through your phone. If you have a pretty strong phone, you can also connect through Ethernet. So Ethernet's a really good option. It's a very stable connection. So if you have access to a port and a cable, that's always a really good option to have. I think that's just a fail safe regardless. If you can do it, always good thing to do. From there, you can go up to having a bonded cellular like antenna device, something like Scalera, which I mean we can kind of talk more in depth about that, but it's just essentially a radio antenna that takes information from pretty much a lot of different carriers, whether it's AT&T, whether it's Verizon, T-Mobile, whatever kind of cellular service the providers you can get. You can go and have those in that device. So when you're like driving in the middle of like the desert, you'll have cellular service.
Yeah, that's right. So you mentioned a couple of them right there. So for me, as a producer and director of photography in a studio environment, very often excellent Wi-Fi for, it's there for several departments to be using. You mentioned bonded cellular, Scalera being an absolute favorite for me, Mr. Net being another favorite. And then Teradek and the Creative Solutions folks have a node-based solution, and they're all generally the same. You're taking a couple SIM cards and you're sticking them into usually a matte black device. And you're, as Frank mentioned, hopping between cell towers as you come in and out of range of these various cell towers. So, and this brings up a workflow thing, which I really want to touch on. So like with everything, we don't take the camera, never look at anything, and wander out into the desert. No, we pre-scout things. We check available, cell reception in a given region. That's still important.
Yeah.
We'll talk about whose job this is later, but whoever his job it is to be part of the scout, if you are doing a camera to cloud solution, you've promised this technology to your client, to the network, to the director, whomever. This is what those people should be doing on that scout, giving some thought to connectivity. And Frank touched on Wi-Fi router, bonded, and then there's also satellite-based solutions now, such as Starlink, I guess, being one of the more flashy options these days. So they all have pros and cons with them, which is important to keep in mind. For example, most bonded cellular devices aren't great in like direct downpours in a way that a Starlink would be okay. They have a mobile tier package that works that way. But the issue with satellite-based is the satellite has to have like a one-to-one point connection with you as they travel around the planet. If there's a tree here or a gigantic skyscraper, you might have issues. So for me, satellite becomes viable if I'm in the middle of a not very hilly desert. But for me lately, bonded has been sort of my favorite. And then there's a whole nother, you could tether off your phone if you have a nice device, or you could use another type of mobile hotspot as well. So did we cover the whole spectrum there, Frank, of internet?
I think we did, but I also wanted to jump into like what you were saying earlier, like the pre-production step, and we'll get to like how pre-production and like production and all of that kind of gets squeezed together to be a little bit more efficient. But yeah, like the people who are out scouting locations, just like if you were going to buy a house, you want to take your phone with you to make sure that you have cell coverage wherever you're going to be living for the rest of your life. Use the same thing. You have to think about the same stuff when you're out on location. And the FP is again a really good tool for that, because we have features like the director's viewfinder that you can use and take some photos, take videos, and have those kind of sent through camera to cloud, so people like the director, your producer, whatever, the rest of your team could have access to that and pre-plan and really set the stage of what, like, where we're going to shoot, like what elements are going to be brought in for the production, stuff like that. I think that's really important too.
That's actually, so you touched on one of my favorite things about the FP and the FPL is because it is one of the world's smallest full frame cameras. It is very often the first thing that I go to for very small early stages in the production. And it also, I'm able to adapt it, to my favorite PL cine lens of choice too. And then you touch on the director's viewfinder mode, which is a personal favorite of mine, using the actual glass you're filming your project in the actual aspect ratio that you want to be mastering your project in is so incredibly key. So okay, so we've touched on, internet. We're kind of going through the various stages of camera to cloud here. Now, we touched on Frame.io a little earlier, but now might be a good spot to kind of break down. If you're new to Frame.io, what is Frame.io? It's an Adobe company now. I should say I don't work for Frame.io. I work for Sigma. So, I'll do my best to kind of explain this technology. But it's a cloud-based, browser-based, also app-based collaboration tool. And why this is cool is you can have various project members on, say you're given film, and they can be commenting or in fact drawing directly onto the footage and saying, oh, if say it's a post-apocalyptic film, hey, there's a person taking a selfie on that mountain in the background. Or in the case of HBO shows based on books, Game of Thrones, where there's a coffee cup in the corner. Maybe somebody could have circled that, at some point in Frame.io, and that could have been communicated to the rest of the team that way. So, it's just this collaboration tool that I absolutely love, because in this world where many of us are working remote these days, it's a great tool for that. And you just click on the camera C2C tab, and there's a little green indicator, and you can label your streams. So for me, I'll label it like, Graham's FP1 or something. And then, and I did a test on the way out to NAB and stopped in the desert, and it took about 8 seconds or so to get that proxy file into Frame.io. And it does feel a little like magic when it first happens, but I was watching that pop right up with the metadata. So that was very, very cool. Obviously.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. Like, again, it's such new technology, and I'm still kind of getting the hang of everything too. Frame.io has been around for a couple of years now, and I've kind of been along with them for the ride to kind of see the progress they've done and like the stuff that they're planning to do in the near future. And it's pretty impressive. Like, they're really, if you can get in now, like we said at the very beginning of this whole thing, if you can get in now and like learn as much as you can, like, you have a good spot to be like the person on set that takes care of all this. And maybe I think that's one thing we can kind of touch in right now, or even a little bit later. Like, whose job?
Sounds good. Let's do it. Yeah. Whose job do you let us know in the comments if you think whose job this should be. But Frank, what's your take on that? Who on set should be the camera to cloud guru?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm still kind of debating it myself. I don't know whether it could be the DIT. It could be like another camera assistant. It could be a completely brand new thing that we introduce. And again, I think we're all kind of like really finding the space of where this is going to fit in exactly. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but I don't know. I'm still learning, and you're on more sets than I am at the moment. So maybe you can give me and everybody else your insight.
Yeah, as you say, it is a subject of much debate. And right now it comes down to like a person-to-person conversation that I've been having. Like, hey, are you cool with this? Like most new things. I will say that it's less of a strange question to be asking anyone in any of those various job titles that you just mentioned, ACs, DITs, et cetera, or a dedicated specialized role, because we're already living in this world of virtual production, so to speak. If you're not familiar with virtual production, it's just sort of this kind of catch-all, dangerously catch-all, way too broad term that includes everything from like Unreal Engine techs working on an LED volume space for Mandalorian season 2, et cetera. So we're already creating these new job roles like volume tech, and for me, it kind of fits in that space. I will say though that, if you don't have the budget for a specialized role, in my role, kind of sometimes I'll one-man band a thing. I'm able to kind of execute that workflow by myself, primarily because there aren't too many failure points, right? So the failure points are the HDMI cable pops out. That's been a thing for 15 years. I don't know, 10. You can Google how long HDMI has been around. And then, of course, the internet connectivity piece. And then because I'm always getting that real-time feedback, I feel comfortable in an incredibly small crew environment, just seeing, okay, 3 files remaining, whatever. I have the peace of mind knowing that that's happening. On a multicam, A++ rated premium blue chip scripted documentary for someone like, or scripted or documentary for somebody like, HBO, you need a dedicated person. They need backup. If you're multicamming something like this, it's just you need more people. So I
Right.
like that because the technology kind of grows with, whatever you have to be doing. It's all the
Mhm.
way from, the one person band all the way up to kind of large scale production, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to like the tiered uh, programs
Plans.
on like
Mm.
yeah, on the plans that Atomos and Frame.io have. It's like you can pick and choose what's going to work for your situation. If you're just starting out today, maybe tomorrow you're a full-on pro, like working on HBO set. Like you never know. Sometimes things happen really quickly in the industry that you have to be kind of prepared for. And I think this is just an easy way to be, ready to get going.
100%. And, as I've alluded to, the future proofing side of this, if you become sort of the camera to cloud guru, if you're the
Hmm.
go-to person for this, it makes you sort of infinitely hireable in a sense. You
Right.
become the person who knows how to do this. I mean, I remember trying out like the first drones, the first UAVs. It's kind of a scary, kind of a, there's a little bit of fog out there making it all work. But to me, this technology doesn't feel like the early days of drones. This feels
Hmm.
way more intuitive because, as you mentioned, Frank, it has that feel of like live streamed broadcast already. So it's something that
Right.
people from that space can wrap their head around a little bit easier. And we mentioned
Hmm.
multicam. The entry costs also
Hmm.
remain, I think, very accessible. So
Right.
it's always tough for me to be like, this is what the FP costs now, but we could take a shot at it. So if you go to B&H, an FP kit is I know that FPL is like 2,500 maybe with the kit
That's
lens. Am I in the
it's
ballpark?
Yeah, it's a little bit more, but if we're talking about just the bodies, you're looking at like
Okay, thanks.
24.99 for the FPL. You're looking at 18.99 for the FP.
Mm.
So they're really attainable, I think. And then with the bundles that we're offering right now, through people like B&H, we have even bigger deals with it. Like something like the Sigma FP and the Ninja 5 is something around 2,099. So again, really, really accessible, I think.
Very accessible, and with as Frank mentioned, those free tiers with both Atomos Cloud Studio and with Frame.io. And yeah, I mean, you touched on the bundles. So I think one of
Mhm.
the things that's really cool that that Sigma and Atomos have been doing is they partnered together and they said, okay, you want to do camera to cloud, here's the SKU on B&H. So that took
Mhm.
for me a lot of the guesswork out of like, okay, well, which pieces of hardware are required. So if you're scrolling
Right.
through B&H looking for CTC stuff, C2C stuff,
Mhm.
definitely run some searches like FP, Atomos bundles. That'll get you there. And I think maybe the only piece of this that then you still have to consider from a hardware side, I think, is actually the Atomos Connect piece. So
Right.
just keep that in mind. So that's kind of but with that, you have the full hardware to get up and running if you are using those free tiers for both Frame.io and for Atomos Cloud Studio. Very
Right.
attainable.
Yeah, super easy to use. I like, again, like you said, sometimes there's a lot of like little frustration, a little bit of fear when you're like trying to put together something that's completely new and you have to go through like for me, I'm guilty of having like 20 tabs open in my browser sometimes and like trying to go between all of them and try to piece together all that information. Where I think we've done a really good job together with Atomos and some of our dealers like B&H to try to condense everything into one place where everyone can kind of learn and get like a step-by-step process to go from not knowing anything to then being full on pro and going out in the field and recording in like a couple steps.
Okay, that's funny you said that about the browser tabs. Yeah, I'm not guilty of that. I'm guilty of the sin of having 7,000 files on my main desktop. So
Oh,
currently my
right.
desktop is a lie, basically. I create
Ooh.
folders that are like July 2023, and the secret there is every file prior to July 2023 or whenever is squished into that folder. So it looks
Yeah.
like I have 5 folders, but I'm living a lie in terms of my organizational abilities. Frank, let's talk use cases, breaking it
Mhm.
down sort of by category. So why don't we start at scripted, and I'll give it a shot there, starting us off. So in scripted, you have this classic idea of the daily. So I've made a couple of feature films, some of them for streamers, and there are some stakeholders that can't be there on set to view the dailies. And sort of classically, you would have usually a hotel kind of conference space where at the end of a given filming day, usually sort of the above the line people would gather and they would see the footage from the day. As the pace of production has accelerated, I've been a producer and currently am a producer on projects where I just simply can't be there because I'm in a different state or in some cases a different country. And I'm able to be a part of that dailies process just by logging into my Frame.io. So that allows me being a stakeholder on various projects. I can still give my input. I try not to be too micromanagey. I'm working on that. That is my cross to bear. But that for me is a big part of why it's exciting for scripted. And then we've touched on this a lot, Frank, but it's the idea that I need to get buy-in from the editing team on we're making a neat thing. And there's always that post-filming conversation after I've recovered physically and emotionally from whatever it is we've been filming, where I'm
you can do that. You can do that.
You can do that. Oh, that just
I didn't know that was an option.
Yeah, for a lot of mostly yoga, but you are able to get the editor and to see the dailies and to feel involved and maybe even to catch things, which is very, very cool. So I love being able to introduce those folks earlier. So the whole dailies process, being able to work with remote teams on scripted is so lovely for camera to cloud. So I don't know if I missed any from your perspective, Frank, but
no, I think that covers a good amount of it. I know sometimes if you're a cinematographer, one-man band kind of shooting things, sometimes you get lost in the artistic expression and the vision and stuff like that. So it's really important to have that collaboration, people to really bring you back to reality. So you can be okay, this is what we actually need to cover. This is what we need to get in order to make this entire storyline that you're envisioning in your head actually come together.
And one of the things too about scripted so dramedies, if you're familiar with this genre, we'll take a quick sidebar. It's there's giggles and then somebody's also dying at some point. I mean, it's basically that. And
classic Shakespeare.
The classic Shakespeare. Thank you for the Shakespeare nod. So it's a mixed tone sort of thing that often I require some input from a slightly wider team than I would. It's did this joke land? And are you crying now? So being able to have that tone kind of look at that tone from more people I trust globally, that's really important to me on scripted. So that might just be a me thing, but if you've worked on mixed tone stuff, which is very in vogue, then you'll kind of understand what I mean. So Frank, we should talk documentary. I mean, we're talking sort of about the one person band. What other reasons would camera to cloud be useful in a classic documentary setting from your point of view?
Oh man, again, sometimes you don't get producers and stuff you can't always be everywhere. And if you're part of so many different projects, sometimes you only have a skeleton crew of, again, one or two people. You have the camera guy, you maybe have a sound guy if you're lucky. And then that's pretty much it. That gets sent out into the wilderness with a little camera package. Here you go and capture stuff in the middle of a wartime. So they're busy trying to survive and then tell a story at the same time. So a lot of the review process kind of gets lost in that, and having someone externally to be able to send stuff to more, again, an editor to kind of make sure that we're kind of piecing together the story in a linear or non-linear way to make it cohesive. I think that's really important, and that's one of the main benefits of having camera cloud technology.
That's a great point, Frank. I mean, I would say that I just did a project for the BBC. It was a crew of 3. I worked on crews size of 3 all the way all the way up to 180 if people are on the call sheet. And for us, this was just a few months ago, so it's fresh in my mind. And I wasn't able to use camera to cloud at the time because it's very much in its infancy now. But had I had access to camera to cloud, it becomes a safety thing, which is interesting. So it was a project for I'd say the largest British television network. And safety. And there's a whole team of like risk assessment people, producers, story people that can't be there because we're dealing with potentially dangerous contributors, code word for they may hit you mid-interview because you make them mad. But also in crowd situations, they can be seeing the clips and be like, hey, the crowd is now throwing things. Does your local security on hand know this? So there's actually an interesting safety element to this that I really appreciate, that people can follow, not in a micromanaging way, as I touched on, but they can understand, okay, the team's there, they're getting clips, they're safe,
Right.
you know, and then they can ask very valid follow-up questions if it's not lunchtime and you've gone dark for 6 hours. So, you
Right.
know, there's ways you can ask questions in that scenario. So the safety aspect of it for documentary appeals to me as a person who wants to ideally live a long time and have a big career.
Yeah, no, I mean, continue with that safety. Like sometimes in the middle of when you're shooting all that kind of stuff, sometimes your camera equipment will get damaged, and then like there goes your whole day of like filming, like, or it gets stolen, God forbid something happens or whatever, like just the heavens open up on you and everything gets ruined. You have at least those proxy files to kind of fall back on, and maybe it's not the greatest quality, but it's something to have and use when there really is like no other option available to you. I think that's a really important thing for sure.
100%. And you mentioned, you're right. That's another great reason that I actually didn't even consider. You're right. 30 megabytes per second HD, or if you're using the free tier, it's 720p. In documentary, I've used stuff from 1917, you know, really like very pixely. You have some AI enhancement options now,
Right.
but suddenly stuff becomes very viewable if that's the only thing that you have from the side of wherever. Okay, we should touch. So we're getting near the end here. I don't know if we have any questions coming in. So Frank, if you see any questions, let me know. But moving to commercial for a second. So I just did a commercial with a European watch brand called Hublot with a famous soccer player named Alex Morgan in San Diego. And the stakeholders were in Rome, Paris, somewhere in France. And they were literally, one of them was walking around on the street trying to give me feedback while I was filming this commercial. And I have like one AirPod in because I'm listening over, I think it was like WhatsApp audio. I mean, it was a whole thing. And if they had been doing sort of the Frame.io following along the clips thing, I think it would have been easier for everybody. See, the thing with commercials is usually on a minute to minute, hour to hour basis. You're spending the most money you've ever spent on a minute to minute basis. The stakes are usually very high because you're working with a very busy, high profile person sometimes who has to go do other things, rightfully so. And so you don't have them for a long time. And having that buy-in from other people around the globe, in my case, would have been lovely on that project. So it was also a heavy VFX project. I very rarely get to have the most VFX people in the field with me. Usually maybe you get one or two small team of VFX supervisors in the field with you, but having other people able to weigh in on that, because I can't tell you how many times it's happened where I'm like, I think there's a plane here that's flying past you that you're reacting to, you know, and it's a little unclear. And having somebody be able to see the clip upload, screenshot it, drawn it directly on their iOS or Android device and just send it to me would have been lovely. Commercials, and also commercials, you very often have excellent Wi-Fi, I find, on some of these studio sets.
That's not surprising. That's believable. I believe you. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
No, I think from the simplest practical, like just the simple, like the plainest point, you can't be on the phone for 5 hours while you're on set and then same hand hold like a camera and get to work, or like direct an entire crew to get this shot. You have to have a more effective method of communication, and that's across the board with no matter what you're shooting. So yeah, camera cloud again for the win, for sure.
Yeah, camera to cloud for the win. And look, we're nearing the end of our time here, but I wanted to tackle this question from Ren off Vimeo. Ren, thank you for your question. The question is it worth it to get this system while still in school? What do you think, Frank?
I think the more you can like involve yourself with, like while you're in school, like, and if you can branch out to do stuff outside of school, it's always beneficial. You know, I went to film school, and not to say film school isn't fantastic, but a lot of times you have to be out in the field and you have to look for new tools and educate yourself on those tools outside of the classroom, because things happen really fast in this industry, and you have to kind of be prepared. And it's always, I think, from my perspective, yeah, I think it's worth it.
I think it's worth it too. Quick anecdote. This might date me a little bit, but in school, Adobe like gave us the early versions of like Premiere, basically. And I came out of school being very dependent on Adobe and now the creative, the CC suite, I think they call it, because I was just primarily using that in school, and I had a level of comfort with at least that suite of tools as I entered the industry. So same thing, and it goes back to the idea of being infinitely hireable. Is if you're the camera to cloud person and you want to devote some time to this, you can end up on larger productions, I think, faster, because there's a level of fear from people that have been in the industry about adopting the new fun latest thing. And if you can get past that, then you can end up on a a set of your dreams, if you will, being the camera to cloud guru, which I think is so incredibly exciting. So
yeah, it's always cool to go back to your classroom and be like, oh, I know this, and like you end up teaching your classmates about stuff. I think that's always kind of a good like boost to your self-esteem as well. Like, you know, something that some people might not know.
100%. Well, as I think we bring Derek back here, I think we're about out of time. Frank, where can people find out more about camera to cloud as an idea? Did you just do a blog post? No.
Oh yeah, we did. We released it on the 1st, just like 4 days ago. With a video of yourself explaining all the steps to go from, again, beginner all the way to getting it all fully functional and up and running. So you can find that on our blog at sigmaphoto.com. You can also find us on Instagram, and we interact with a lot of people on there on Sigma Photo and at Sigma City for in my case.
And finally, a big shout out to Atomos for their help making all of this happen, and a huge shout out to B&H for having us today. I can't tell you, at like, what is it, 9 or 10 o'clock Pacific, and I see that Deal Zone email hit. I'm there every single night. Every night I'm on B&H. I have an issue.
I'm in those Deal Zone emails too, to be honest. I'm keeping an eye on them as well. This was great. I kind of want to throw something out and introduce a topic of discussion here as I was listening to you guys. I mean, Graham, everything usually starts with the cinema world, and then it filters down to the mortals of film, like wedding photographers, the starting out documentary, your amateurs, your hobbyists, your weekend warriors, all of that. I feel like everything is pulled, even with still photography, you have a lot of techniques that are pulled from film and cinema, because it's such like, that's the creme de la creme. So with this camera to cloud, I can obviously see in the cinema world, it's a no-brainer where it's going to make sense. Is this something that, do you think it's going to have the same impact for the non-cinema world, for people who are making films on I don't even know what the proper adjective is to use, a less global,
lower budget.
Lower budget. There you go.
Yeah. Frank, what do you think? I mean, I've shot weddings when I was absolutely starting out. It's been a little bit. What do you think, Frank? For the every man or every woman out there, does camera to cloud show promise?
Oh, I'm a part of that everyman, like, low budget scene to this day, and I'll speak to it from like a content creator kind of influencer sort of like point of view. This is going to be a really great tool again for working with brands. If you're going to reach out to brands and have them be a part of your projects, or if you're doing any kind of like trade for content sort of deal, a lot of time brands are kind of at the mercy of reaching out to these influencers or vice versa, and then kind of waiting to see what is produced. I think a lot of them would love to be as involved as possible and give you guys as much feedback and opportunities for success to promote yourselves and our products as well. So I think in that space, I think it's going to be really nice to have that little selling point to you if you can kind of pitch that out to different brands. and be like, we can do this shoot for you, and we can have you be involved whenever we're shooting. You can give us your feedback, and we can make sure that we're covering everything we need to. I think that just elevates both sides of the equation.
100%. And you know, everybody started doing low budget. Honestly, like if the story's there, if it's interesting, if the crafty's good, I can be convinced to do many things. And also, Frank, we touched on how attainable this was, Derek.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this is a without doing math, there's a reason I'm in film, a couple $1,000s, and you're doing camera to cloud. I mean, you're in it with a Sigma FP and with an Atomos Ninja 5 and the Atomos Connect. So that isn't a crazy barrier to entry. At least I don't think.
No, like when you can kind of compete in the same realm as like $1 million commercials or like other productions and stuff like that, I think that's never a bad thing.
Totally. I mean, I think I love it that everything is so much more easily accessible. It really puts the onus on the creator and the mind. Right. You know, if you have a great idea, you know, we're starting to see it more and more where it's all about the idea and the execution. It doesn't matter if you have a huge budget. If you have a great idea, you now have a platform. No matter what your platform is, there's multiple options, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, you know, somebody that hosts their own show or a podcast. There's so many avenues to get your work seen that I feel like it's less about, oh, well, this looks like it was shot on a $5 million budget. No, this looks like it was shot on a $50 budget, but I love the idea. And I love the way there's just something about it. And I think that's what I love about where we are with the technology now and everything, not only making it easier, but making it cheaper. You know, it's for a couple $1,000s. Like you said, you can go out there and do things that 10, 15 years ago with that budget. Yeah. Good luck.
Right.
Now, before we close out, I want to get you guys' take on this, because I got a question, and somebody texted me in a question who's watching out there. And this is more of like an industry question. And it's such an interesting point that I don't think a lot of people think about. So a friend of mine who is a still photographer who had an opportunity to photograph BTS on a Hollywood production. And it didn't realize, being a still photographer, just being ignorant to all things Hollywood and cinema, didn't realize about the whole union thing. And you know, there's this disconnect between like, hey, in the still world, it's like you can pretty much, you know, run roughshod and do whatever you want. Once you move into the film world, it's a different set of rules. So if you guys could give one general piece of advice for those people who might be interested in getting into the cinema world, where would you point them? Where do you start? How do you really start getting your wheels greased as far as if somebody wants to get into film, how do they go about it?
Well, first, Derek, I didn't know that texting you questions was an option. Do you want to share your cell phone information here so that other people
flash it up on the screen? We'll put up the fake 1-800 number.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a multi-part question. I'm interested to hear what Frank has to say about it. I guess for my part, I'm a union IATSE local 600, it's called, director of photography. And then I'm in the Producers Guild of America. I think it's called the Motion Picture Council, folks working on the motion picture side. So these are large unions and trade organizations that help define standards. In the case of the Producers Guild, what a producer should do on set, and what a producer ranges from somebody who Venmo'd somebody their contribution for their film to someone who's a creative producer actually on set doing, you know, the work, the day-to-day work of producing a thing. In the case of Local 600, this organization called Contract Services, and then all of the major studios are constantly sending us training information on how to be more comfortable on set and how to integrate better. Now, for somebody just starting out who doesn't have access to that, there's more content online than ever before. Shout out to a website called cined.com. Full disclosure, I'm a contributor to this website, and B&H is a sponsor of this website. But there's a lot of tools on there, a lot of information. Also, mz.com is this great portal that's also affiliated with CineD for learning these initial things. And then nothing can replace making content, making stuff. Just makes you better at making stuff if you hit record on more stuff. Sounds basic, but it'll get you there. And then I guess my final thought before I turn it over to Frank is production assistants are in some ways the most valuable people on set. There's the production assistant that chills in the corner, never makes eye contact with anyone, and never asks any questions. They tend not to be my favorite people. They absolutely have their role, but the people who walk up and are like, what does this mean? And why does this work? And can I help with this, or have, contributing ideas? Those people I love. And often those PAs, those production assistants, again, the most entry-level job in the cinema industry, end up very quickly becoming associate producers and on, or joining the camera department in some capacity. So Frank, in the last couple of minutes here, breaking into the industry, what do you think?
Again, kind of following you is asking questions, being present, making connections, being hungry, but being humble at the same time. I think there's a lot of people that get fixated on like, I have to be the best and like grow egos to it, which this industry has enough of. I think being somebody who's very passionate about what they do, but then there's also someone who, again, once they get to a certain level, can also bring and elevate other people at the same time, is someone that everyone wants to work with. Like Graham does a really good job of kind of talking to people and really being personable and, again, elevating them to the next level. And I think that's why he's so successful, and why anybody who works in this industry, whether you want to be a director of photography or if you want to be a producer or whatever it is, I think being someone who is going to be helpful and contribute to a really healthy industry, and then going to events and networking is, I think, the way to break in.
Oh, thank you, Frank, for the compliment. But yeah, attitude. Try to be a good person if you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's invaluable advice for life, really, but
right,
particularly in the creative. Work hard, be nice to people, do your job, ask questions, right?
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is don't be afraid. I know sometimes it's really terrifying. I grew up in a small town where like you can walk from side to side, like end to end of the town in like 5 minutes, and like the only thing to do was go to Target. To then moving to Los Angeles and then being a part of this entire world, like this amazing, fantastic creative space. And it's scary at first, but don't be afraid to, again, ask questions and learn as much as you can. Everyone starts somewhere, and you just have to start and take the first step.
Full disclosure, Frank, I would love a small town where all there is to do is go to Target, because I live in New York City, and that's still all I do is go to Target. So. Guys, this was awesome. I think we're gonna have to get you guys back in the future, because it was great. Just honestly, just sitting here and listening to you guys talk about what you do is interesting, and I don't even think you realize the amount of inspiration and information that you get out and just sitting there and talking about what you guys do on an everyday basis. So I want to thank Graham, Frank, Sigma, Atomos, everybody behind the scenes that made this happen. I mean, this is what we love to do, is get information out there for people. We do it for free, which how can you possibly not get down with that? But huge thank you to you guys again, and to all of our viewers out there. Of course, we do this for you. We provide this information so that you can go out there and make something of yourselves in the creative world. But that's all we got for now. Another rendition of the B&H virtual event space wrapping up. We'll catch y'all next time. Thanks, guys.